I don't have opinions that, millions of Americans don't share. People must be held to account. The media has created this environment in which it's okay to say almost anything about somebody who is, right of Jane Fonda. If you have slightly conservative or even libertarian points of view, especially if you are persuasive and charismatic and funny and effective, like we both are, you will get called the most appalling things. And it's a way of legitimizing, in some cases, as happened last night, violent responses.
Leftist protesters, joined by a large contingent of anarchist rioters, promptly gave him everything he could ever hope for. A riot, complete with violent destruction of property, large objects set on fire, and Yiannopoulos supporters beaten in the streets. It was a vicious and disgusting display of just how fascist many on the campus left to become.
This usual slurs that they wheel out in a sort of effort to legitimize violence against you. They want to call you the worst possible name. It's like, the punch a Nazi thing, right? Well, I could imagine a reasonable person being taken some way along the argument of, it's okay to punch Nazis, but the problem is that the left calls everyone Nazis. So basically, they can punch anybody.
Wait a second, isn't it Nazis who do the punching? Isn't that what separates Nazis from the rest of us? They don't tolerate dissent, but civilized people do?
You would think so. When my book was announced, of course, there were people saying they were going to burn it while calling me the fascist. This is the sort of irony the progressive left in America doesn't seem to appreciate. But the real problem is this name-calling, because, as grateful as I am to be on the show, and I like the attention, the real people that I want to hear from are, the guys who run CNN, who are legitimizing ordinary conservatives being called white supremacists, anti-Semites, racist, sexist, when they're not.
It takes what looks like half a phalanx of riot police to give a speech about freedom at a university today. What is wrong with you people? What is your major malfunction? Oh, in the media, they're protesters, they're protesting. No, they're not. They chant mindless hate slogans and smash things with rocks and hammers and set fire to things and break things. That's not called protesting. That's called disassembling not just buildings, but civilization itself. I don't think they're going high anymore.
The campus left has been engaging in this sort of fascism for at least a year. Not every campus leftist group engages in this sort of violence. I spoke at Berkeley last year, no problem. But a shocking number of campuses have experienced this sort of fascist anti-free speech garbage. Yiannopoulos has been at the receiving end of these sorts of receptions at campuses dotting the country. And the riots aren't really about Yiannopoulos. They're about the very concept of allowing someone on campus who the left considers radical.
Well, they're in a bind, aren't they? Because if you come out against it and you condemn it, you're sort of saying there's something wrong with your own side. You're saying that something we have done has created an environment in which it's okay to physically attack the guests. Let's be completely clear. There's this attempt to paint what happened last night as the destruction of property and as sort of, as protest. It wasn't. It was violent rioting in which people were physically assaulted. People were bleeding. People were beaten. All sorts of things happened to people who just showed up, not all of whom were fans of mine, but just who wanted to come and just listen to what I had to say. And those people were attacked, physically attacked, right? This is political violence in response to perfectly mainstream opinion. And what CNN and other networks like that want to do is suggest that there's something otherworldly or sinister or nefarious about me to legitimize the bad behavior on their own side.
Last February, I was met with a near riot at Cal State Los Angeles. At Penn State, students tried to break through locked doors to disrupt one of my speeches. I was banned from DePaul in the aftermath of a student disruption against Yiannopoulos and told I would be arrested if I set foot on campus. Jason Riley of the Wall Street Journal was disinvited by Virginia Tech before finally being allowed on campus. So this stuff is happening all the time.
I feel actually more optimistic about this than probably most conservatives because, I've been on more college campuses, I think, than anybody else in America for the last 12 months as part of my tour, and I have seen a change in atmosphere. I've seen conservatives becoming more emboldened and happier. I have seen also huge numbers of alumni changing their positions on whether or not they're going to support their old schools. Missouri, when they kind of pandered to race baiters, they discovered they lost, $30, $40 million in alumni donations, and enrollment went down so much they had to close 2 dorms. You know this.
Yes.
This is going to start happening all over America. And my view is, you know, that the American higher education market, and it is a market, is going to fix this, because schools are going to have to pick. Either they go the direction of the University of Chicago and they say, you know what, don't apply here if you want safe spaces and trigger warnings. This is a place you come to be challenged. This is a place you come to expose yourself to people you think that you're going to hate, and see if it changes your point of view. Or they're going to go the direction of the University of Missouri, and only one type of those institutions is going to be financially viable in the long term.
The academic left, second of all, has prepared the way for a lot of this campus fascism. Why is all this happening right now? Well, because the campus left has built up a pseudo-intellectual bulwark around such fascism. They've told students they deserve safe spaces, areas in which their ideas are not challenged in any way. They've forwarded the culture of microaggressions, which urges students to see any speech they find offensive as a form of aggression to be countered by other aggression. Here's NYU professor Jonathan Haidt on the phenomenon. He says, the recent collegiate trend of uncovering allegedly racist, sexist, classist, or otherwise discriminatory microaggressions doesn't incidentally teach students to focus on small or accidental slights. Its purpose is to get students to focus on them, and then relabel the people who have made such remarks as aggressors. As a professor at Cal State LA posted on his door before my speech there last year, quote, the best response to microaggression is macroaggression. This line of thought actually encourages evil. As Professor Roy Baumeister writes in Evil Inside Human Violence and Cruelty, hypersensitive people who often think their pride is assaulted are potentially dangerous. Even when a neutral observer would conclude no serious provocation occurred, it is still important to recognize that, in the perpetrator's view, he or she was merely responding to an attack. Colleges churn out and reward these oversensitive people.
One of the things that authoritarians hate, one of the things dictators hate, is the sound of laughter, because they can't control it. They can't control what you find funny. And that's one of the reasons the left is always trying to dictate what humor is acceptable. You know, oh, you can't tell that joke because that's sexist. You can't tell that joke because that's racist.
When the left shuts down his speeches, when they riot, when they engage in actual violence, when they pepper spray those who come to hear him and hit them with metal poles, all they're doing is legitimizing Yiannopoulos in the public eye and making him the victim and selling him lots of books and making him lots of money. President Trump has weighed in via Twitter. He says that he will withdraw federal funds from UC Berkeley if they can't maintain free speech principles. That's actually appropriate. Spray painting "Kill Trump" on walls, smashing ATMs, assaulting people, that is not appropriate behavior in any civilized society. And for those who are doing the spray painting and the smashing and the assaulting to proclaim that they're anti-fascist is patently insane. Forget Yiannopoulos. The issue is the left, and they are out of control.
So who am I? All right, I'm a human being and I'm 33 years old. But if you take a microscope and you look at any part of me, you see cells. And I'm a community of 50 trillion cells doing a magic dance. And you look at any one of those cells with an even closer microscope and you see 20 trillion atoms. And so I'm also a community of 1,000 trillion atoms. But when you look at those atoms really up close, they fade away and all you see is energy. And 13.7 billion years ago, at the Big Bang, everything that we've ever found in the entire universe was one infinitesimal, undifferentiated, pure energy. All of us are energy. A human being is a very complex pattern of energy. So I stand here as a 33-year-old, basically motionless, but when you look up close at any single part of me, I'm moving the speed of light. And I'm the age of the universe. So the question for me is, I know this conceptually. Why don't we feel it? Why do we walk around and we're so sure that we're a human being all the time, and we never feel like we're energy because it sounds awesome? And I think the reason that we don't notice it is because we are so distracted by the human levels of our experience that we fail to notice what is always sitting beneath. And yet the one thing that remains is this feeling of existence. I am remains. This feeling of I am. And what I find when I sit in that state is that what my identity is, whatever it is beyond perception. It cannot be perceived, but it is still experienced. And this I am is the root of our entire existence. I am is latent in every single aspect of our existence, but just like a fish might never notice the water that it swims in, we might never notice the I am because it's covered. Maybe I'm not a human being that has consciousness. Maybe I'm consciousness that is shaped into a human being. And when I see this totally empty experience, there's no content, form, structure. There's not even a model of space and time that is generated in the mind. And we've seen those conditions before, 13.7 billion years ago, when the entire universe was an undifferentiated pure energy. And so just maybe there's the potential to realize directly, I am that energy. I always have been that energy, and I always will be that energy. Einstein said that thoughts suffer from an optical illusion of consciousness. This illusion that there's a separate person inside an environment, when in reality there's just energy in motion everywhere. And just like an ocean is water in motion, we can call a certain part of that ocean a wave, but it gives us the illusion that the wave is a separate entity in the ocean. But a wave is not in the ocean, a wave is the ocean. And similarly, we might not be waves. Maybe we're the ocean. Maybe all of us are energy, and we can realize that directly. Now, this experience could never be reduced to words, because it makes words. But it could be experienced, and I think it's such an important experience that people have been trying to name it for thousands of years. And they call it spiritual enlightenment. And I think the first human beings started realizing that they were fundamentally energy about 2,500 years ago. And all of them say the same thing. They say it is the complete ending of human suffering. Well, of course it's the end of human suffering. All suffering is based on the illusory separation that there's an individual in the environment, that there's a person that has to survive, that this specific collection of 1,000 trillion atoms has to hold itself together. But if I realize directly that I am energy, and I realize that the body and the mind are a temporary manifestation of that energy, then I can fully accept the death of the body and mind as something that does not happen to me, because I was always energy and I always will be. And if I experience that directly, this voice in my head that tells me I have to do certain things in order to be fulfilled loses all of its power. At this very moment, I never have to listen to that voice again, and so everything in life becomes a game for fun, a play. And we've all experienced that, but it's very hard to remember because we were so young, and maybe we were at the beach building a sandcastle, and the entire world faded away because we were only building it to build it, and we weren't trying to get somewhere else. We hadn't even learned how to plan. And so the only moment that mattered to us was right now. I think this experience is so important and powerful that every religious tradition at its core has been trying to convince us of its importance. And if it's true, if the true end of all human psychological suffering is actually possible, it is the most important thing science could be studying. When we look at monks and nuns who have meditated or prayed for thousands of hours, we see remarkable shifts on their brain scans. Trillions of neural connections have changed configuration. And along with this quantifiable, objective change in the operating system of the brain, they describe a feeling of undifferentiated, infinite oneness. To me, that sounds like they're having the direct experience of being energy. Now, Enlightenment science and Enlightenment engineering would study these ancient technologies of prayer and meditation as data sets to understand what has to change in the structure of a human brain for a human being to understand that they are energy directly. And we still have no idea how much modern technology could completely change our ability to understand that. Maybe it's possible that within our lifetimes we could actually eradicate human suffering. And what would the world look like then if every single one of us felt complete, felt whole, and felt interconnected? When you let go of individual survival, all of your priorities change because you actually see the entire world as your body. You see the suffering of others as your own suffering, and you want to help. And what is the actual power of a human being to really benefit the world when they're able to put the priorities of the whole system in front of themselves, even if that means they have to die in the process. How many of us can do that right now? What if 7 billion of us did that? Maybe the one thing that keeps us from actually solving all of the other problems in the world is this persistent, flawed thought that we are separate from the world. And maybe it's time we change our minds.